We are now live. I'm Victor Dwyer with Pirawna, and this is the Failures and Wins podcast, where we get the latest people to talk about some of their failures, some of their wins, and then we're going to go into a little bit about the gamer advantage and when it comes down to like really figuring out the best way to sleep for eyewear and really dive into how you got started on all this. Bryan, thank you so much for joining. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me. I mean, there's not much to tell. Just kidding. I'm uh, born and raised gamer. I've gamed my whole life. I'll skip the whole childhood story and everything, but
Uh-huh.
I'm just a gamer at heart. I went to college. I spent some time in Fortune 500 working 9 to 5. Eventually found my way to my wife's family business in optical. I worked in optical for a few years, saw a need, started Gamer Advantage, and now here I am today.
That's great. That's great. And what kind of got you in the idea, like, of saying, like, "Hey, this is one of something I want to go create and go off and do"? What kind of like made it where it was like, "Okay, this is a big enough hurdle that I want to try to accomplish that"? What made you kind of take that first step?
Well, the first thing, I didn't know anything about the optical industry other than what I heard through my wife in the years we were together of her working there. And when I joined the business in the business development role, it was very often I was being asked to manufacture blue light eyewear. So the company I was at, what they would do is manufacture and import eyewear and then sell it to eye doctors. And they had their own brands and they also had licenses for other brands and distributors and things like that. So when we were getting asked to make eyewear for somebody, it wasn't an uncommon request, but the level of blue light requests and it was uncommon. And in eyewear, the frames and lenses are really two different businesses, especially when it comes to prescription eyewear. But when it came to blue light, you could order the frame and the lens kind of together, already made in a nice, sweet little package for very little money. So
Mhm.
we did it for a couple people, and what I was realizing is I was buying a $6 or $7 product, selling it for $12 or $15, keystoning it. They were going out and selling it for $50 to $80 and saying
Wow.
things like, this can cure your headaches and help you sleep better and all that stuff. And I had always thought blue light was pretty snake oily, was my impression of it. But as a type 1
Mhm.
diabetic, I was always interested in like things that could make me healthier. So as I was seeing people buy these things in like the tens of thousands for some of these companies that I made the eyewear for, I was like, well, first of all, I'm on the wrong side of this equation from a business standpoint. And on the
Yeah.
second side is that like I need to know if this stuff really works because I don't want my career to be like the guy who made all the eyewear that all the people thought was just snake oil. I didn't want That's not what I wanted to do for my career, is make blue light eyewear for other people. So I spent a significant amount of time researching it. When I kind of had my aha moment a year and a half, 2 years later, I was like, we gotta make this for gamers like me. Like this, what would I wear? What would I like? This is working for me. This thing I found. Okay, so now how do I go share this with this community that I'm ultra passionate about and had
Yeah.
never really had a chance to work in? I always volunteered in gaming and participated in local events and stuff like that, but there really wasn't a career path for me as like kind of a natural born business development guy, especially a number of years ago. I graduated college in 2008. Like there were no esports anything.
Yeah. True. You're right. That's awesome. Okay, that's really neat. So it sounds like you were working in the industry before, and then you wanted to kind of go off and do your own thing. What was the first? What was the first step of saying, like, going from, hey, this is an idea, to something, hey, this is something I'm going to go do? Like when did you either a quit your job to say, hey, I'm going to go full time into this, or when did you kind of do the all your chips all in? When did you
Yeah,
push all in?
it was
Yeah.
probably the most challenging part of the entire process because I had a
Yeah.
full-time job and my full-time job was with my wife's family business. So here I am creating like this other business within a business. The intention of my creation for that was always to be to support the family. Like, but my goal is to put food on the table for my kids. And so that it didn't really matter what it was. And when I got super passionate about kind of bucking this myth that blue light isn't a thing, and like, because I had found something that worked for me. So it was immediately when I found it, I was like, I'm going to do something with this. It The first step was finding the right partner, and that's what
Mhm.
I did first. And so I found the right partner, And then I just kind of always knew that I was going to go all in. It took some time for the business to be able to financially support it. It took a lot of understanding and patience, and you know, pissed off a lot of people along the way that didn't want me to stop doing the other things I was doing to focus on this. But it was the right thing to do because it wasn't like we started it and has had to fight and burn through a tremendous amount of money to get it to where we are today. Like I knew frames. I partnered with the person who knew the lenses and had this technology, and together we created a product that was rooted in, dozens and dozens of years of optical experience between the two of us, not including the optical experience that's on the team behind the scenes for both of these companies. So I think I knew right away I was going to go all in. It was just a matter of like, how long can I work both jobs? How do I not leave my prior employer in a worse position than when I joined them? I can't just bail. Um, really, a best my goal is to always come up with a solution that's the best for both sides.
Hmm.
Um, not
Yeah.
always going for the jugular. So it took some time. It took about 2 years before the company could afford to pay me. I was the last one to get paid, for the record.
That's
We had a full staff and all that. I worked 2 full-time jobs for sure. But in the moment where I knew the company could handle providing me a living, then I said, "Okay, my time has to be 100% this," even though it was. If that makes
yeah.
any sense. Because, like, I was working 100% at 2 different jobs, and I can confidently say that's exactly what I did. I did not let either thing slip between the cracks, but you can only do that for so long until you just absolutely burn yourself out, so.
Yeah, that's amazing, and it sounds like you really took the right approach to it. What when deciding your business partner? That's a huge decision. It's like a marriage, basically. It's a version of a marriage. Um, what made you say, hey, first of all, hey, I need a partner in this? Like, what made you say, like, okay, this is something I need to partner with? Because it sounded like you had a lot of experience before that. So I was curious on why you made the decision to make a partner, and then B, why did you, how did you come to the decision saying, hey, this is a good partner?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think the idea is like, why would I share it if I don't have to? I'm a big
Mhm.
fan of not recreating the
The
wheel,
wheel.
especially when it comes
Mhm.
to technology, especially when it comes to, like, things rooted on the medical side of things. So I just to be this advocate of saying like not all these lenses are created equal, and you're not going to get the same thing out of a $20 pair of blue light glasses on Amazon that you might get from our product. Um, I knew what I had to bring was ultra premium, and I think when you're trying to procure a premium product, having the best possible relationship with the person who owns and represents that product, I was like, there was nothing better to me than having that person in my corner. So it was like, if I know the frames and the frame technology isn't really proprietary, none of it is to anybody, even the biggest eyewear brands in the world. It's the lens. It's just like the Mona Lisa. Like, the frame is cool and everything, but the picture, the thing that's inside the frame, is what's so impressive. Um, and so rather than just say, okay, let me buy these off you in wholesale, and I want to cut you in on this, and that's what I wanted. So I probably could have been more lucrative, I suppose, as an individual if I would have done it on my own. But I felt that partnering with the person who had just as much passion on the manufacturing side as I did on the implementation side was a really good balance. He's much more of an integrator, and I'm much more of a visionary. And although he doesn't work full time at the business, his personality was a huge driving factor because he's a much more I'm very energetic. I love high pressure situations. I love public speaking. He doesn't like all those things. He's
Yeah.
very soft spoken, only speaks when necessary, super smart dude, very humble. And so we just made a good partner just as friends. So it was like, even if I made less money, like, why wouldn't I want to work with this person? Like, that just sounded fun. And I was never
Yeah.
in it for the money anyways. So I was like, I'd rather have a fun job and share it than be greedy and be by myself.
That's really amazing because it's almost like you found a partner that basically countered all your weaknesses, basically,
Well, I
in
walked
a
up to
way.
him, I remember, after a seminar when I finally decided, like, so I used to go to this continuing education, and there would be speaking engagements at different optical shows, and he was giving one. And afterwards, I walked up and I said, "Hey, this is my name, this is where I'm from, and we need to make gaming glasses with that lens you have." And he just like looked at me and was like, I don't know what that means or really who you are, but I like that. And so let's like have lunch. And I think we ended up like having a beer or something together, like really low key. And
Uh,
I just spit it all out. And I said, this is how I feel about it. This is what I think's been done so far. This is where I think the improvements can be. I told him where what I didn't know and what I did know. And he said, that's good enough for me to want to start. And so after a couple of conversations, we formed the company. And he happened to have the domain Gamer Advantage. He had the domain
really?
for a few advantages. Yeah, because he's in the lens business, and so it made sense to have a golfer advantage or a swimmer advantage or a skiing advantage. I think he just had Gamer Advantage like in a pile of domains. And I'm like, wow, it's like what a great like name. Like it's great SEO and it's straightforward, and I'm zero afraid of somebody accusing me of putting the word gamer in it to like placate people because like I am a gamer. Like I've logged tens of thousands of hours in gaming, so
Yeah.
like I'm never
Uh-huh.
afraid to get called out of like, oh, you think you just call it gamer and sell it to gamers? Like, no, this was born and bred and developed by one of your own. That you can
That's
believe
awesome.
in.
That's awesome. And when it comes to getting the word out, so obviously you have a lot of you have a lot of people in the space that you obviously know in the gamer world. How did you go from like marketing? So you already went through like how to create your product by partnering with people, and then getting it from there. How did you go from marketing it? So going from like you have the product now, what did you do to kind of expand the awareness of that product to kind of make it more of a success?
I called all the people that I knew that I thought would give good advice that worked in the industry, and I kind of fumbled my way through it. And I believe beginning that we could guerrilla do this and not go raise a bunch of money and buy big ads digitally. That we could start with a partnership program, and that's what we did. And we didn't
Hmm.
have much digital media at all outside of our content creators, and I solely give credit to those content creators for the beginning of Gamer Advantage. So I hate calling it affiliate marketing, just only in gaming. I think the term affiliate is misunderstood. I think the idea is that anybody who's out repping our product is a member of our family, and they're held to a certain regard, and they hold us to a certain regard, and that's how we started marketing. And just through
Cool.
growing from a follower standpoint and a brand awareness standpoint, then those other things started to surface themselves. Like, hey, it's time to start doing better at email marketing. It's time to start advertising on Google. It's time to start bidding on keywords. Like, it's time to, we've hit this kind of level here in this program. Let's expand a little bit. And so we're still doing that today.
That's great. Yeah, it's a great way to get started. Like influencer marketing, affiliate marketing, like those two ways are done really, really well. And at the end of the day, you're building relationships. So like you might get a relation. Those people, these influencers have lots of following, and they can once that you have a good relationship with that influencer, then it builds on to you can have a relationship with all their relationships. So it's like a really good way to like expand, especially when you don't have a lot of cash flow at the very beginning to like advertise it
It's changed
and
a
go
lot
through that.
too.
It
I think
has.
it's changed a lot. I think that there used to be a handshake agreement that you could say, "Hey, test out my product, tell me what you think." They would give live, authentic feedback, and then you would partner, and there was just this kind of two-way street support system. And now it's very a la carte. And where we struggle as an eyewear company is that you can't go. I could pay a 10,000 different people to go out and say my eyewear is the best eyewear and them not wearing it ever once in their life. It's that easy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we draw a fine line between like, hey, here's this set dollar amount or free product, tell everybody it's the best ever, versus how about we send them to you and you tell us what you think, and based on what you say, we'll decide whether or not this is a good fit. We've never sent our glasses to somebody and have them come back and say, I don't like them. That's never happened. We've had people say
Well,
maybe the fit is a little weird or the color isn't my favorite color. Like it's just not perfect, but we only had such a limited number of frames to choose from that was expected. But we've never had somebody say like, I don't like the lens. I don't like how it makes me feel. Um, Ever really. So that's where I think like we still stay true to that today. We've had so many relationships where they're like, listen, you need to tell us what your budget is to work with this person before we even talk to them. And I'm like, absolutely not. If you're not going to let me talk to them directly and explain why and how we do what we do, then all I can do is give them the glasses, ask them to wear them, and have them provide feedback. And if we can't do that, there's no relationship generally that ever gets struck because we just won't do it without the person actually testing. Because we feel it's that important, that significant.
Yeah, that's amazing, but that might limit your pool
It
to of
definitely
the
does.
influencers that accept it by a
Oh
lot.
yeah. Hell
Yeah,
yeah, it does. Big
yeah.
time. We're okay with
Okay,
that though, because we're working on all the channels, so the quality of the community is also equal to the quality of our other sales channels. And so, for good examples, like we're launching in Best Buy, that's going to be our first retail launch, and it's nearly 1,000 stores, and it's a huge deal. And we didn't trickle retail, we didn't do consignment for an esports arena and then pay another place. I mean, there were places who wanted us to pay to put our product on their shelf. Um, we just saved our energy for the monster. That's the wrong word, but for the behemoth, and we tackled that, and we defeated it, and we won. And now here we are being launched in the store. So we just stick to our
that's
gut a
awesome.
lot at Gamer Advantage. It seems to work.
That's great. That's great. That must have been a really hard conversation to like, because esports has a big name, and like to be in that like authority of a place and to tell them no, that's amazing. Like that must have been
Yeah,
pretty
it's not
difficult.
easy, and my mom used to always say, like, if you don't lie, you don't have to remember what you said. So I think that I try to be very honest and direct with people about, like, this is our situation, this is who we are, this is how we work. There's plenty of brands out there where some of these tactics, it works very well. Like if you have an impulse purchase brand that's under $40 or $30 that you can give out for free for people to test quickly, and it's not this big commitment in their lifestyle, then yeah, these one-off affiliate marketing and influencer marketing things, they work. But for us, it's like we feel strongly that if somebody says these are the best glasses I've ever worn, and then the next time you see them, they're not wearing them anymore, or this has helped me sleep so much when I wear these, and then the next time you see them, they're not wearing them anymore, that over time, it's just like you're just doing what everybody else is doing. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted people who were like, when we said, hey, it was fun working with you for the last 6 months, but we're going a different direction. They're like, well, I'm going to still wear the glasses. I hope you know that. And it's like, that's the best news we can get. So even after relationships end, when we still see people wearing the glasses, that's how we know we had found the right person.
Cool. Yeah, that's a really good that's a good way to approach it. Yeah, I really like that. It's a definitely different way to approach affiliate marketing or affiliate like influencer marketing, but sounds really good. Reaching the premium people out there. So when it comes down to it, what is the biggest thing, right? The biggest hurdle that you have right now? So a lot of people are having trouble with supply chain right now. The rising cost of goods, inflation. Um, what would you say is the biggest thing that's on your mind right now that you're concerned about or you're actively working at to basically fix right now within your business?
I would say the thing I'm most focusing on, we're a bootstrap company like that, and that's the truth. And I want to stay that way. We've been profitable since the day we opened our doors, and that doesn't mean that we're rolling in it, but what it does mean is that we're not disappointing a board of directors, and we're not raising money and promising the world to people with resources that we can't promise to pay back. So as we scale, I do find it challenging to go as quickly as I would like because it's hard to stay financially sound when you do that, and it limits
Yeah.
the number of things that you can work on. So um, there's a lot of improvements we want to make, but we have to make them one at a time, and that's a hurdle that I'm going to continue to have to hold myself accountable to make sure that each thing we do is calculated and it's happening at the right time, and we can stay this level-headed, genuine business that doesn't need to go out and ask mom and dad for money. And I mean that just in the most polite way, but there's a lot of brands out there that we think are just so amazing. And when you actually crack the books open, they're suffering and struggling big time. They make great content. And so we're kind of the other side. We're trying to get better at our content, but we're really zero scared of our business and operational ability. So supply chain doesn't scare me. Staffing doesn't scare me. Inflation doesn't scare me. The things that scare me are the movements within the industry and the bank account.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good thing to be concerned about. And when it comes to So when you don't raise money, obviously you scale a lot slower without the growth. How did you balance that out within, like, how did you come to that decision of saying, like, hey, like, I would rather grow slower but without dealing with like a board of directors? How did you get to that decision of saying, hey, like, or I could grow fast with a lot of capital with investments, but then I have to deal with investors? Like, how did you come to that decision of saying,
Yeah.
hey, I don't want that? Because that's very against what
It was a
typical people
tough
do.
one, and it
Yeah.
was, I don't think if anybody came and said, "Hey, this is what I think your business is worth, and I'd like to invest in it," that I'd say I'm not interested. I think the situation is that we knew we could do it because of some of the relationships we had secured and the revenue that we were generating without it, that we were like, hey, we don't need to go give up equity to get a seat at the table with Best Buy. We don't need to go give up equity to revolutionize and change our website. We don't need to. We had a lot of these great strategic partners in place that I think sometimes you're either doing it for the money because you have the people who on the team can go, they need the money to go make really great decisions, or you're doing it because the people who are investing in you can offer a lot of guidance, and we had the guidance already. So I was trying to figure out, like, well, what kind of strategic investor do I take on? And I still think there's room for that from somebody who's in the like content creation space, like on the other side of the coin. But when it came to like your standard type of venture capital private equity experts, the way they would want to scale specifically an eyewear business is not how I wanted to run this business. And I didn't want to like fall in line with how all these other eyewear companies that were popping up online were doing it. And I was willing to take a little bit lower of a margin to prove that point. And so that's what we did. So we probably made a lot of mistakes along the way, but there was no ladder to run it up. And that allowed us to, and people's like, that's never going to work. I'm like, you want to bet? It's going to work because in my head, I see it working. Like, I don't know sometimes how to prepare for failure because I can't visualize it. I can only see like, and sometimes the things I see working, they're horrible ideas, but in my head, they're amazing. Like, they are
Yeah.
just absolutely amazing. So I'm full of
Mhm.
those. And I think that would have been hindered big time if I was falling in line to the natural process of scaling an eyewear company online.
Yeah. 100%. And when it comes down to it, is there is there anything else that you think is very important that every entrepreneur or every person should know when starting a business? Whether it, like, if you're seeing a lot of people that are doing this but should be doing this, um, or any mistakes that you see people constantly doing, or anything along those lines.
It's hard for me to give an opinion too because I've been told I should do so many things, and some things I didn't, and I'm glad, and some things I didn't, and I'm mad I didn't do them. Like, that person was right, and I should have done that thing. So first of all, like, you can't blame anybody. You just can't. It's not even worth blaming yourself. That's the whole point of this, is to go through these trials and tribulations, and people really struggle being wrong and making mistakes, and like, I
Yeah.
enjoy saying, like, I had no idea, like, or I get into a call and like, listen, I'm not an email marketer. Like, I know that's crazy that I'm an entrepreneur in the gaming space that isn't a digital marketing expert. I'm not. That's not what I do. So to pretend that's what I do. So I would say, like, the biggest consistency I see is this level of defensiveness from entrepreneurs and business owners, where they just like feel the need to be always the guy everybody should go to versus the guy who's going to other people. So my advice is to create like this really strong network of people, like ask people, like, who do you know that I should know? Like, wow, you have this really strong connection with this person at this business. Can you introduce me? Like, there is no conversation that I'm ever unwilling to have. And so I've just
Mhm.
built this like massive database of people who I stay in touch with either through Discord or DMs or text. And I just don't have any pride in it. Like, I'm totally cool. Like, what do you think I should do with my business? Well, I hate your logo and you should throw it in the garbage. You will not hear me get defensive about that. And that's
Mhm.
something that I think entrepreneurs struggle. They limit their network because they're not okay with criticism, even if it's constructive. And I
Yeah.
like it all, even if it's not constructive. I love to hear what people say, and even my own employees. I'm like, I had them just roast me one time. I'm like, just roast me. Just say everything that's on your, like, Because if that's how you're perceiving me or my actions, then I need to look at that. And there's not, it's that self-awareness and this defensiveness of like having to hold everything so close to the vest and brag about it continuously, but not really being able to share how it is you did it. Either because if you
Yeah.
did, people wouldn't be nearly as impressed, which I think is the case in a lot of them. Like if you didn't really go out and revolutionize something or invent something or create something, the worst thing you could do is pretend you did. What you should be doing is giving credit to the people who helped you get there. That it will
Yeah.
pay off big time in the long run.
100%. And it goes down to like people don't like a person that boasts about themselves. Like we don't like cocky people. Like
Right.
if I were to say like, oh my gosh, look how good I am, people are gonna go like, screw this dude. Like no
Well,
one's
and
gonna
if you do it
care.
tactfully, I think it's okay. It's more of like,
Yeah.
what if you thought you were good and I said, hey, in that last match we played in Call of Duty, like you really like that was the wrong move right there. Like you turned left, you should turn right, and if you wouldn't have done that, we would have won that match. What your natural instinct is going to be to tell me to F off. Like you're angry with me, but you know I'm right. And I think the more we can work on saying like, yeah, you're totally right. Like thanks for pointing that out. Like I was thinking the same thing. People are like what did he just like agree with me? Like what the hell just happened? So that's just really disarming, and I think that it allows for more conversation. I think there's a lot of businesses out here going back to not reinventing the wheel. If you have a business and you have this great thing, teaming up with another business that has similar values and morals and core competencies that you can really scale together rather than like compete against each other, even though you're not even close to being in the same category. We don't have to fight over
Exactly.
influencers. Tell me a great influencer you worked with, and I'd love to try and do something for them as well.
And it really comes down to like when it comes to the criticism conversation, it really just comes down to insecurity. It doesn't like it comes down to like if you tell someone like, hey, you shouldn't have done that type of thing, then they get defensive because you're like threatening their identity. Like for example, if I put all my identity into being good at Call of Duty, for example, and if I do bad in Call of Duty, it's I'm going to have a negative self-image of myself saying, wow, I suck as a person
Right.
for doing bad in this match. And so my identity is wrapped up into the game. And if you were to tell me that I suck and I did have if I was insecure, then that would really damage me because you're damaging my
Right.
identity.
Right.
But if I'm confident as a person in who I am, like, and my identity doesn't involve anyone else or any external factors, I just know who I am as a person. Then if you, no matter what you tell me, I'm gonna say, cool, yeah, you're right, and then it doesn't hurt me. It comes down to like self confidence and then insecurity. And once you're able to conquer that, then I think as a human, like obviously that's something that you had to work through and go through, and eventually you're at the point where you're confident and you can say those things, and that's amazing because that means you're radically honest with yourself. You're telling yourself exactly how it is, and that
Yep.
makes it where there's not a lot of room to be a delusional version of yourself because a lot of insecure people they think oh like oh I'm this like for example those entrepreneurs that say like oh I'm all this I'm Lamborghini like house all
Hmm.
this they're building this delusional version of themselves of them being perfect in every way which makes it which actually shows that they're insecure a lot and they try to hide it but internally the people that are radically honest with themselves like oh they're hurting on the inside
Exactly.
when
When you
they're doing that.
when you're self-aware, the happiness comes from the ability to solve problems, not the absence of problems. And I forget where that quote comes from, but it's like one of my favorite in the world. And you're absolutely right. You can't identify with your self-identity cannot just be Call of Duty. It can't be. Like you'll
Yeah.
never find peace if that's what it is. And like so Tom Brady has lost plenty of games. You think now maybe he does, but you as a fan, what would you say if he said like, "God, I'm just an awful person and I just like really hate my life." You'd be like, "How could you say that? You're a multimillionaire and
Yeah.
you have 6 or 7 Super Bowl rings. What like it's like how could you say that?" But it doesn't matter how much money he has, and it doesn't matter because your mind and my mind are pretty much on the same level as far as like yours isn't coated in gold or have any extra sections that mine doesn't have. So it's like we're kind of on
Yeah.
the same page there, right? And
Mhm.
money can't buy control over that. So I do agree that
Mhm.
the defensiveness, that's what I see in this, just the industry as a whole, is like you're right. If people are boasting through material possessions, then that truly still isn't like the definition of happiness. It could be their definition of success, but it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that they're happy. And I want to do a job where I'm happy and I want people to be happy working for us. And so I just focus on so much more than the money behind it. Because I think that burns a lot of people out, especially when the people don't react like, "Oh my God, look how successful you are! I'm so impressed." That makes them even angrier. Like I don't really, I've had a lot of meetings with some pretty big influencers where like there's been situations where I just almost say, and I'm really direct, but I'm also very honest with myself. So if like you can give it back, we'll get along really well. Where I'm just like, I didn't know who you were before this call, and the money and the fame like is completely separate to me. That's a business transaction. Like I want to get to know you as a person. Like I'm zero impressed by the car you drive or the house you live in. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't help me judge character or intention at all.
And I think that separates a lot of the difference between normal people because a lot of people see versions of success. Most people will look at success that goes, "Oh, you drive the house, like the Lambo, everything else," and that's their version of success and being super wealthy. But the people that are radically honest with themselves, they know that no amount of material possessions will even make them
Mm.
1% happier. And when you're radically self-honest with yourself, that makes it where you're not impressed when people are doing those things. You just see it as like, oh, okay, he just hasn't figured out that he doesn't know. Like we see it as almost a negative almost that, oh, he doesn't know that it doesn't drive happiness yet, like because those are obstacles that they have to figure out, and being self-aware that you have to go through and understand like, hey, these material objects will never make me happy no matter how much I get. And that's some self-awareness that you have to
Yes.
go through to understand that in yourself. It's hard. It's hard. It
Yeah, I
requires you
always
to.
laugh. My wife's a big fan. She
Uh-huh.
likes to follow celebrities and stuff like that. So she'll be like, "Hey,
Uh-huh.
it's so and so's birthday." I'm like, "Did you wish the other 3.5 million people were having a birthday? Like, who gives a flying F if it's this person's birthday? Like, no offense. Like, if I knew you
Mhm.
or you wanted and you were letting me know, like, hey, it's my birthday, I would say, hey, happy birthday. Like, that's awesome. How old are you? And I would make conversation out of it. But, like, I don't need the news to tell me that it's Reese Witherspoon's birthday. I don't care. And I think that makes it hard for me to work in the gaming industry because, that is a huge. Now, I have a massive amount of respect for the people who have built their brands off of some of that being their shtick or their MO. And I think that those bragging moments are important to be successful in this industry because that's what a lot of the fans are looking for. And if that's how they gauge success or that's how you win people over, hey, but as long as when the camera's off and it's, you're okay, that's what's most important to me. Like, and that our eyewear has a lot to do with that. Like, people are grinding and not sleeping and not healthy for this pursuit of something, and they're not finding it, and they're just killing themselves basically, trying to do it. And so that's kind of why we do what we do. And we're all like, we all have to sleep. Like, I don't care, again, how much money you have, doesn't matter, you have to sleep, so we can at least have that in common.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah, that's very true. And I think the just to add on to that a little bit, it really comes down to the ability to have a conversation with yourself. Because I see a lot of people that work and work and work, but it's because like this is something I used to do, that I used to work 14 hours a day because so that way I would never hear the thoughts in my brain of like judging myself and all these
Hmm.
other things. But I would never confront those things because I would always distract myself with work. And I feel like that's what so many people are doing, especially in America, where we're all about work, 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 work. And I feel like we're either running towards something or running away from something. And when we have these voices in our head that are constantly judging us and going through those emotions, it makes it where we're always running away from it. And you have to be comfortable with having that conversation, being alone and having that conversation with yourself is some of the biggest the biggest hurdles that some people can ever overcome. If you're able to look in the mirror and be happy for who you are, that is like the biggest like obstacle that you can accomplish as a human being. Like one of them. If you can look in the mirror and say, "This is my friend. I like this person." That is
Yep.
like the biggest accomplishment you can have, in my opinion, on that.
I don't disagree with you, and I think
Mhm.
that I think that when you're what are they, I forget how the saying goes, but like you can't change the past and you can't predict the future. You shouldn't spend any time there. Like, yeah, should you plan for your child's future? Like, yeah, but you're really planning for your child's right now, which is part of their future. Like, so it's like that's different.
Mhm.
But when it's these people, like we're either stuck in the past and we're reminiscing and we used to be this person or we used to be that guy, or maybe 10 years ago we thought we were going to be in this place and now we're not in that place and we can't figure out why. But you don't know what your future self wants.
Yeah.
You just got to live right
True.
now. Like, do what you like right now. How the hell are you going to know in 10 years you're going to want to do a thing? I thought for sure I would want to go skydiving my whole life. And then I ended up not doing it before I had my daughter. And then I just don't want to do it. I don't care what you think of me. I have tons of adrenaline, and I would do other very intense things
Mhm.
that would get my blood. But for some reason, I stopped wanting to. The passion to skydive disappeared, and I'm not mad at myself for it. And so it was
Mhm.
interesting because if you would have asked me 10 years ago, like I was like it was like one of my number ones on my bucket list. Like I just have to
Mhm.
go skydiving. And so I
Yeah.
think we do that same thing. Like I want to live in this house with this kind of family and drive this kind of car and blah 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 blah. And then you finally get to that point and you're like, well, I don't really care about that car anymore. What the hell? Now what am I going to do with all this money I saved? And that's a good
Yeah.
feeling, right? That's it. When you get to
Mhm.
the point you have the money to go buy the Corvette, and then you're like, I don't really care. I don't want it anymore. I'm like, is that
Mhm.
okay? Like, yeah, because it's my money and I can do whatever the hell I want with it. Like, I don't need anybody's
Exactly.
permission. I'm not an idiot if I don't go do that thing I said I was going to go do 10 years ago. So living in the now is huge. It's just huge. And that's
Mhm.
what you need to present to people, what you have now, not what you're going to have. Like, that's cool. You
True.
think you're going to have all this stuff. And if you keep grinding, let's talk about what you're doing now because that has to work too, or you'll never get to where you want to go.
And what's scary about all that is when people go through, luckily you had the realization before you bought all that stuff, but imagine if you were going through and you did buy the Corvette and buy all these things and then have the realization that that Corvette never led to happiness. Like
Hmm.
a lot of people go through that same cycle of like, oh, they buy that thing that they've always wanted and they think it'll make them happy, and they get it and they're like, well, now what? And then they go through the same thing and they're just going through this endless cycle of expecting happiness, accepting happiness, or expecting happiness and not receiving it, expecting happiness, not receiving it. And it's the same cycle of going through, and they end up like just keeping up with the Joneses. That's really like
Maybe it
what they
does,
do.
and sometimes maybe it does make them happy. I think that's awesome. Like
Hmm.
maybe it does make them happy, and that's fine. But then move on. Like, what are you going to do? You're not going to live in your Corvette. You're not going to sell your Corvette. You're not going to take
Uh-huh.
pictures of it for money. Like, just let it be a thing that makes you happy and move on with your life. It can't. It's not the end of your life. It's just a car.
No,
Like, so
true.
cool. You got it. Congratulations. Drive it whenever the hell you want, and like, let's move on. It's like,
Yeah, true.
I think what happened is people get really happy, and then they're like, wait, like this is I feel the exact same. And it's like, yeah, you experienced that was happiness. Did you like it? Yeah. Okay, now go do something else. Like what it's, and I know the feeling because I know when I got my truck a few years back, and I just like I could stand there and just stare at it. Like, I would just stare at it and be like, man, I'm so happy to have this thing. Like it's so awesome. And then my son
Mhm.
ran into it with his bike. He's 2 years old, put a dent in the side of it, and I was like, whatever. You know, but if he would have hit it 2 years ago, I would have felt different. So just stuff is definitely going to wear off. And so enjoy the moment and move on with your freaking life. You got the house, you got the car, cool. Like now what are you going to do with it? Go
Yeah.
volunteer or do something.
Yeah. And it sounds like you have a really big your mind has a really big approach to stoicism, meaning like there's like you can't change the past, you can't change the future, or you can't predict the future, so don't worry about it. And it's really really comes down to not judging yourself is what it really what came down to. Like for example, when your son ran into your bike with the truck, you could have gotten really angry about it. And you
Hmm.
could say, I can't believe he did that. Oh my gosh. And then you would have blamed him. And like that
Hmm.
anger would have swelled up and would have got really angry. But when you said like, okay, it happened, I can't change it. So like there's nothing really I can do. And he's like he's young, so you can't really blame him for like what happened. It's just okay, well, I can't do anything about it. I'm not going to worry about it. But that's because you're radically honest with yourself and you don't judge yourself. And that made it where you didn't put that judgment on him, where you didn't get angry. So it's really you're in a really good spot if you're not judging yourself, and that way you don't judge others, and that makes it where
Yes.
you're a very clear person, you're a
And I'll
confident
put
person
another
about it.
layer on top of it. I have the confidence that if I don't overreact to something, that down the road, I'll probably be somewhere and run into somebody who fixes dents that I had a great conversation with that pops it out for me in a Kroger parking lot. That's what's going to happen. And so like that's where my head goes. Like I don't that can I still drive to work? Is he hurt? Like none of that matters. I didn't plan on posting a picture of my truck on Instagram anyway, so it didn't matter, right? And then, but what is even more exciting is just like somehow that will come back up again and it will resolve itself, and that will be
Mhm.
happiness. So not only am I not experiencing the anger, but then somehow I experience happiness out of a dent in my truck because of what it turned into. So that's how I search it out, and that's genuinely how I try to infuse the energy into my brand.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Is there anything else related to your business, when it comes to hiring employees or when it comes to finding the right partner, or any other mistakes that you see that other entrepreneurs are doing right now that you think they shouldn't be doing? Is there anything that's been top of mind that you would have been wanting to communicate, saying, "Hey, I've been seeing a lot of people do this. They need to be doing that." Is there anything else you want to communicate there?
Yeah, another good one, it's kind of along the same lines, is like the things people are asking for are, like I said, are rooted a lot in what they expect to be in the future versus making deals on what it is right now and trusting that together you can scale. And so one thing that I see a lot of is people falling in these like cookie cutter, like, well, that person got this much money to do this thing, so I should get that much money to do this thing, and not looking at it much further than that. Versus like this guy, he's better looking than you, and he's got a deeper voice than you, and he's got a better camera than you, and like that's why he did better than you. It has nothing to that's why they paid him more. It had nothing to do with CCV. It had everything to do with how he looked in your shirt. um
Yeah.
so I think that like one of the things is that like take a deal that makes you happy. Like who gives like who cares what everybody
Mhm.
else is doing? Take a deal that makes you happy. And when you're brokering a deal for either your business or yourself, because content creators are businesses too, their existence is their brand. Like
Mhm.
if you don't know why you're saying yes or no to something, like you should figure that out for yourself, not rely on somebody else to tell you like this is good, this isn't good. Because we've had a lot of relationships that we've just struck with the right people, and they end up just making a tremendous amount of money working with us because our brand is still, there's a lot of opportunity with it, and they just make a ton of money. And then you have these other people who are just, they're all hell bent over like $300 a month stipends, and we're like, okay, time out a second. Like here's the facts, here's what we're offering. Like we don't have to be mad about it. Like just say no thank
Mhm.
you or say yes. Like don't say I'm a bad business owner because I didn't give you what you expected to get. That either means you need
Yeah.
to reanalyze what you're offering, or I'm an idiot, and maybe I am, and one of us will be right at the end. And to me, it doesn't matter. I've already moved on to the next thing. So I think it's just being
Yeah.
realistic. I think it's like, here's where I'm
Mhm.
at right now. This is what I'll do for you right now, and this is what I expect to happen if this thing I'm saying I expect to happen happens. Like,
Mhm.
I think a lot of events I get asked to sponsor, they're like, oh, well, we have this person and this person in line to be the title sponsor. It's like, are they the title sponsor? Like, no. I'm like, you don't have anybody. They're not the title sponsor. So don't tell me you have somebody who might be a title sponsor. 'Cause you're
Mhm.
trying to placate me a little bit. And I'd rather you just say, like, hey, this is what we need to make this a success. Does that fit for your business? And I can say yes or no. And if I say no, it doesn't mean you won't ever talk to me again. So like, just because you don't get that deal you wanted, that first thing you put on the table, don't write those people off too. Don't burn any bridges, man. The bridges that get burned in this industry, because they're all pent up and passive aggressive, and they get mad about something and they can't communicate it, and then they end it in a way that is as non-confrontational as possible, but in the end ends up being the most confrontational thing they could have done to their business. They've put this unnecessary pressure on themselves by not just being direct and honest in their transactions. So, don't burn bridges, and don't think out too far ahead to try and convince somebody to invest in you. Talk about what's happening, the real things that are happening right now. I'm really good at this, but here's a few things I'm not good at.
And it's so important not to burn bridges. Like, especially like you have to think about the relationship. Just because you didn't get the short term thing that you wanted, it doesn't mean that you basically have like a tantrum. A tantrum. I don't know how the word goes. Like, you shouldn't have a tantrum about it and really just go crazy because you didn't get what you wanted. At the end of the day, it's all about the relationship. So even if they don't become a client or they don't end up paying you, it's like, cool, like in the next 10 years we might end up doing something awesome, sweet. Like that's you have to think about it like long term rather than just trying to think everything short term. At the end of the day, it's so important.
I have a really good example with a staff member. I when we first started the company, I hired an intern. It was a paid internship to help me with social media. It wasn't a good fit. It
Hmm.
wasn't that he was a bad guy. It wasn't a good fit. He just wasn't the social media intern that we needed, and we weren't. It just wasn't a good fit. And at the end of the day, what we did is he just said like, "Hey, I don't think this is working." And I'm like, "You know what? You know where I think you'd be a really good fit is in this role." And I made one phone call to my cousin, who's in this executive position at a utility company, and I said, "Hey, you got any openings in this category?" And he's like, "Actually, I do." I'm like, "I want to refer you to this guy who's interning for us because I think he'd be a really good fit on this consumer engagement side of your business because he's not so good at social media." And it wasn't bad, but you get my point. It wasn't
Yeah.
creative. He was more like an analytical guy. And he got hired. He still works there today. He's been there now like 4 years. He's got like this amazing job with benefits and this amazing salary. And he wasn't a good fit for me. But I connected the two together, got him placed. I know he's eternally grateful for that. But was in my other experiences with interns or entry level employees, when they don't like something, they just go AFK. They like don't show up to work anymore. They're
Yeah.
like mad. Like they don't. They're so afraid to just come and say, "Hey, this isn't working. Can we fix it? Or how do we part ways?" Like 2 week notices used to be a thing that like if you ever did not do that one time, you were like your permanent record or your reputation in the business world was like, no, that guy's like he'll bail. Like you always had to get. And now 2 week notices are like laughable. People are like, I don't need to give you a 2 week notice. I quit and I quit right now. And it's like, okay, well,
Wow.
I already knew this wasn't working, but I had another job lined up for you. I don't know why you're so angry about it. Like, so that's it's just a good example of a guy. He never burned the bridge. He was very honest about it. We had a great conversation. I'm like, God, this guy's so mature and he just handled this so well that I feel comfortable referring him to a senior level executive as a potential candidate for a position. Where if you just left me, no matter how great you would have been at the skill set for that job, I would have never put my neck out there for you because you just abandoned me and we could have just talked about it. And I never did anything
True.
to deserve that. I guess if I was like a piece of crap or a verbally abusive supervisor, that'd be different. You'd have every right not to come back, but that's not the case working for.
Yeah. And like I watched a video recently from Simon Sinek talking about like Gen Z and how they just like quit on things. And a
Hmm.
lot of it comes from the ability to not deal with confrontation.
Hmm.
So a lot of it we're in these social media bubbles, like these niches in each particular one. And I'm all for social media, by the way, but like it's just the reality of the situation. Like there's all these people that are in these bubbles and then where they're all agreeing with each other and there's no confrontation. And when another person says hey, that they disagree with, they say, nope, that's wrong, because these bubbles basically increase and inflate their egos for that. And they basically have a bias saying, hey, I'm right. There's no way I'm wrong type of thing when you have a bunch of people that are together. And it makes it where confrontation is really hard for us. And that's why the video I watched was interesting because Gen Z was so against confrontation. They're so not used to it. They don't know how to deal with it and have
Hmm.
those hard conversations. It was really, really fascinating to me that yes, like at the end of the day, we weren't raised to like have and go through these hard conversations because we almost never have them. Like just for
Yeah.
context, like Gen Z almost never has context of like these hard conversations. They don't want to have the hard conversation. They don't know how to have a hard
Right.
conversation. So it's like it's a little bit difficult on that side.
That's why I'm grateful for
Yeah.
some of my more formal training in the Fortune 500 because I was a branch manager at a bank. I was like 24 and I had to fire somebody who was 50. And it's like,
Wow.
I learned a lot in that scenario, like even the smallest subtle body movements can be misread or misinterpreted, and so I learned a lot. But I think that there's no reason to look at confrontation as negativity. If somebody said confront your addiction or confront your problems or confront your abuser, that's a positive thing. Like, you're standing up for yourself. And then when we say like, well, I had to confront this person about this thing in business, it's like a fight. And I think that, like, it's just, instead of calling it confrontation, let's call it a conversation, because that's what
Mhm.
it's intended to be. Just because somebody says something to you that you don't like to hear doesn't mean they're being confrontational. They might just be trying to have a conversation. So I have like this idea for, this is the only place I've ever said this, but for Twitter, for Elon Musk, where it's called "Say It to My Face." Like, somebody
Mhm.
posts something that they're super confident typing it, but then the person they posted about can click "Say It to My Face," and it like loads them live, and it gives that person a chance to join live. Like, they get a limited amount of time. It like dings on their phone and a push notification. It's like, so and so
Wow.
wants you to say it to their face, and then you're both here, like you and I are, and
Uh-huh.
then see if you can
Wow.
say that same thing you just typed on Twitter. Because if you can't, you shouldn't be typing it. If you can't
Yeah.
speak to it and you can't have a conversation about it, then you shouldn't be typing it, because you're doing just as much damage. You are just as confrontational. Like, just because I don't know what your name is on Twitter doesn't mean the impact of your statement wasn't the same. So, like,
True.
just say it to my face. I can't punch you through the camera anyways, and I probably wouldn't if we were in person. But like that, I
Mhm.
just love that. Like, if you can't say it to somebody's face, maybe you should just not say it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And it's you learn so much through those hard conversations. It's so vital, like, to just going through that conversation saying like, "Hey, like, this is how it is. Like, this is what's going on." And if you do that in a nice tone where you're not like being aggressive about it, like, it usually ends up being pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, you learn a lot about each other when you go through those hurdles, because the relationship usually ends up being stronger if it goes well. And sometimes they might act immature off of it. Like, there's a lot of scenarios it could go, but during those hard conversations, usually that relationship gets a lot stronger versus not having it at all, because you build up resentment toward that person if you don't have it. Because you're building up when you don't communicate, it just builds up, builds up, builds up. I can't believe he did this. I can't believe. But once you finally communicate it, it all goes away. Like, it goes, okay, we're clear, everything's good. But you have to communicate. That's the whole thing. If you don't
That's probably the
communicate it,
number
then
one
you just quit.
struggle. That's the
Hmm.
number one struggle. That's why I think this is so business appropriate. Because most entrepreneurs are creative, and then they don't understand the um, evolutions of their business. That there becomes a time where your creative style of leadership is not appropriate to scale this business, no matter how much you think it is. You have to be okay
Hmm.
with that. And if you don't, you'll probably get stuck in a crisis, and
Hmm.
you'll just sit, your business will live there forever because you just can't let go. And I think all of that has to do with communication and directness. And if your employees are saying, hey, you suck at this thing, but because you're the boss, they're not allowed to say that, then you got a major
Yeah.
problem. So,
Yeah. In my previous company, I when I owned it, I basically said like, "Hey, if I suck at something, like, you let me know so that way I can fix it and let's move on."
mhm,
And what I just did by saying that sentence is I removed a filter, a natural filter. For example, if I work really hard on a piece of art and I say, "Hey, look at this art. I tried so hard on it." You're gonna have a filter in your head. You're gonna go, "Okay, I should probably tell him it looks great, even though it looks god awful." But if I create this art and says, "Hey, I'm working on my art piece. I know it sucks right now. I'm trying to get better. Can you just let me know what your thoughts are?" Boom. Then your filter is completely gone. It's like, okay,
right.
I can give him my honest feedback. So you have to realize these natural communication filters that we have, break them, and then so that way you can communicate effectively. It's hard. It's hard,
Definitely.
but it's something that we need.
Definitely.
I know we could talk about this for 10 more hours, but
I
unfortunately,
know
that's
we
all
got
we
like
have for
two
today.
minutes, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. That's unfortunately all
It
we
was
have
fun
time for
though. It was
today.
different. It was
Yes.
different. I like talking most of the time talking about the story of our eyewear and what blue light does, and sometimes I think humanizing our brand is good too. So it was good to be able to
Yeah.
talk about things that had nothing to do with glasses for a change.
Yeah, I was going to wherever the conversation flowed, and that's kind of where
It's
it ended
cool.
up going. So
Totally.
that's
Totally.
great. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining. Please tell them how to find you, your website, where they can buy some. Like, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
everything is Gamer Advantage. We're probably most active on Twitter or YouTube, but everything's just at Gamer Advantage, gameradvantage.com. My handle is Ready Set Reedy. I don't know. Just watch Gamer Advantages page. I try and tweet, but I literally only tweet for the business. You won't get much out of me other than doing it for Gamer Advantage. So,
Mhm.
I'm totally available. My DMs are open. You'll be able to find my Discord name. You probably should find my cell phone number if you tried hard enough. So I'm always down to game and get to know people. But if you're the one thing I'll leave you with is if you ever buy a product from us and you don't like it or you don't want it or something doesn't sit right, I can become personally involved. Like, so I don't ever want anybody to hesitate trying our product because they're afraid they're going to get stuck with it. That's one thing I have my finger on. And so take a chance on our product, and I think you might be pleasantly surprised.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for
Well,
joining. That's all we have time for today.
all right, man.
Thank you. This is the Failures and Wins